Hi, my name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here at Kings Harbor, and thank you so much for utilizing this resource. Our hope for you and anything that we provide is that you would expect transformation, that we could demonstrate love towards you because of the love of God demonstrated to us, that you would have the faith stirred in you to deal with obstacles and to see opportunities, and that ultimately that the kingdom of God would be revealed in every area of your life. And so our hope with this resource is that the Lord would speak to you powerfully.
If you got a Bible and you're with us, go to Psalm 16. For sake of just wanting to be a good steward, I'm going to skip a lot of the intro stuff that kind of acclimates you to the message and what we're thinking, and I'm just going to jump in. And so here's our main idea. As followers of Christ, our joy is not defined by circumstance or culture. It's rooted in Jesus. And so as we look at Psalm 16, I think it's a fitting place for us to be. If you were with us in the fall, we actually spent a lot of time talking about joy and the value that we want to flesh out for you this week, or I shouldn't say value, the outcome that we want to flesh out for you this week is us being a people who experience joy. Now, I want to be mindful of that because I think sometimes when we hear that, joy kind of has been maligned in one of two ways. One of the ways that joy has been maligned is that it's emotional and temporary, and therefore it's secondary to the things that are theological and eternal, and therefore we shouldn't really waste our time and effort in that, especially when our culture, when joy often looks like folly, and the scriptures would tell us to avoid folly. The other one is, I think, less maybe cerebral and more personal in the sense that if joy is something that can be accessed and you're not feeling joy, then it's scary to go after it. And so let's just put that out of sight, out of mind, that we don't necessarily feel the pressure of that. But what I want to invite us into is there's a reality that our culture shapes the way that we think, shapes the way that we see success. But what I hope is that over the next few moments as we look at the scriptures, that the scriptures will shape our desire for joy and therefore our pursuit of it. And so I think Psalm 16 is fitting because Psalm 16 and all of the Psalms that you read are poems. They're prayers. They are not meant to be language of the mind. They are meant to be language of the heart. When I was younger, I'm going to say something and I'm going to need to explain it from generationally. When I was interested in a young lady, I didn't sit down and write her an essay about all of her favorite qualities with my 3 points in my paragraph and then my 3 concluding points. I didn't do any of that. What we did back in the day is that we would offer somebody that we liked a mixtape. Now, some of you laugh because you're like, oh man, I remember a mixtape. Others of you are like, I have no idea. So let me make this make sense generationally. And so maybe if you're a generation before mine, what you did is that you went to wherever it was that you hung out and then you put a little bit of money in the machine and turn on that song in the jukebox. And whatever your song was, it was language of the heart. And so maybe your song was, I got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I got the month of May. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? And let's pause. Because I got some questions we need to answer. I do need to know what makes you feel this way. This girl that you're dating is apparently a sorcerer because she can change weather patterns. Or if in the middle of the winter you feel like it's the month of May, apparently you've got a fever. Because this language of your heart isn't logical. There's a guy named Tevin Campbell in 1994 wrote a song called Can We Talk? And the essence of the song is he's writing to this woman that he doesn't know saying, hey, I wish I could get to know you. And he wrote a full song about somebody that he doesn't know her name. That's not logical. But language of the heart isn't the same as language of the mind. And what I love about the Psalms is that the poetic expression of the Psalms intends to push past your mind and get down into voicing your heart. And I think if we're going to be a people that we will be marked by being a people of joy, that it's got to get past the language of our mind and push down into being the language of our heart. And so Psalm 16 verse 1 would say this, protect me, God, for I take refuge in you. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have nothing good besides you. As for the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones. All my delight is in them. The sorrows of those who take another God for themselves will multiply. I will not pour out the drink offerings of blood, and I will not speak their names with my lips. And see what David's doing. David is beginning this address to the Lord, kind of describing this relationship with the Lord. And the way that he's describing it is he just says, okay, I seek you for refuge. Now, a lot of times when you read a psalm and the inscription before the first verse, it'll tell you the situation. Like when you read Psalm 51, it tells you that this is after Nathan had confronted David with his sin. But Psalm 16 doesn't give us any of that. We don't know when it's happening or why David's writing. We don't even know if David is just making a general plea, Lord, I trust you in this way. But as the rest of the psalm begins to build out, he's building this idea that because of my connection to you, I can trust you for what's good. Amen. In fact, verse 2 would say it so strongly that he says that you are my Lord and there is no other good besides you. And then he begins to make this comparison. Like when I look at the saints and I look at the way that they live, I admire and delight in the way that they live versus those that are caught in idolatry. They have sorrow while these people have delight. That while they're running to something else for good, trying to find hope in something else, that it just multiplies their sorrow. And so he says, if I'm going to make a decision here, I'm not participating in their idol worshiping practices. And I'm not even going to mention the names of the gods that they mentioned. Like I'm fully trusting and committed to you. Amen. So I wrote it this way. There are two paths before us. The path of trust and loyalty to the Lord leads to good. The other leads to sorrow. Like, I don't want that to be lost on us. Like, I can say that and like the language of the head says, yeah, that makes sense. But the language of the heart is that the heart wants what the heart wants. And so I don't know that my heart's sitting there saying, well, you know, if I could do some drink offerings of blood and go mention the names of false deities, like that's usually not my struggle in the morning. But my struggle might be in trying to find joy in the security of the vacation that I'm saving up for. Or my struggle might be the joy of saying, as long as I've got this job, I can make sure that my family's protected, that this is my ultimate refuge. And David is saying, there's actually no good besides you. That doesn't mean that those things aren't good. It just means that they aren't good in the way that they could be and should be if they're not flowing through you, Lord. Then verses 5 and 6, and a great way to read this is this verses 1 through 4, this confession of trust in the Lord. And then verses 5 through 6 is this explanation of the experience. Verse 5 would say, Lord, you are my portion and my cup of blessing. You hold my future. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. And that language is not just poetic language. It actually points back to a historic idea. If you were to be reading through your Bible, maybe some of you are working through the Bible in a year. Maybe some of you are part of the Bible recap class that we're doing here on Tuesday nights. And as you're doing that and you're walking through the history of the people of God, there's going to be a moment after they've come out of captivity that they're getting ready to step into the promised land that God gave them. And that language that people are going to get a portion of the land, that there's going to be language about them drawing up lots. And so drawing up lots is this idea of rolling dice or pulling the straw to see who gets what. Like this language about portion and lot and inheritance harkens back to, hey, remember that time when the Lord in all his faithfulness provided what he promised he said he was going to provide for us. And he says, but I'm not worried about some land. I'm not worried about some inheritance one day. You are my portion. You are my blessing. You are the inheritance, and you hold my future. He said that the lines have fallen in pleasant places for me, like the boundaries that you've given me have fallen in pleasant places. And indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. And so instead of it being about a location on a map or some portion given to you financially or some other thing, David's saying that I find this in you, that in my relationship with you, this language of blessing and inheritance is actually fully fulfilled. And so I said it this way: our relationship with the Lord gives us the language for celebrating stability and freedom. It gives us the vocabulary to say, I'm finally settled. I'm finally at home. I'm finally free. Like David, who had never known being enslaved as far as we know up to this point, that he had never been incarcerated in some way. He had never been in exile in some way. Now, he personally had to run because of what Saul was doing to him, but there's a level of freedom that's different than if you were in Egypt and you were a slave to a pharaoh. And he goes back to this language and says that this relationship gives me language to say that you've given me a place and you've given me a stability. And then verses 7 through 11 live out a similar pattern to 1 through 6. 7 would say this: I will bless the Lord who counsels me, even at night when my thoughts trouble me. I always let the Lord guide me because he is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. My body also rests securely. For you will not abandon me to Sheol. You will not allow your faithful one to see decay. You reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. 7 and 8, I just want you to see this confession of I trust you again. That the Lord is my counsel, that even at night my heart instructs me. Now, there's a lot of debate around this verse, and it can be read one of two ways. That language of instructs can be disciplines or chastises or rebukes. It's this sense of correction. And if we were honest with one another, isn't it nighttime when everything gets still and there's no activity and there's no event to run to and there's no people to be around, that when you get quiet enough and still enough, that your heart begins to reflect over your day and maybe says, If the question last week was, does that bring glory to the Lord? Maybe it's that time at night that you're laying there and you're saying, well, that didn't, and that didn't, and that didn't. So one way to read it is that your heart is bringing up the accusation of what you haven't faithfully done. Another way to read it is that at night when you're by yourself, because oftentimes in the scripture, that picture of night is isolation and darkness and difficulty. It's weeping that endures through the night. Night is meant to be difficult. That even in that place when there's no external voice to remind you of the counsel of the Lord, that within you, because you've spent time with him, that it's the voice of the Lord that instructs you, that reminds you, that encourages you as you lay there at night. I think both are true. I think that it's true that in that moment when my heart is overwhelmed and I feel the condemnation of the ways that I've been unfaithful, that it's the Lord's counsel and the reminder of his goodness towards me that gets me out of it. That I stop staring at my navel thinking, what do I need to do to be better? And I'm reminded that it's already been done. But it's also in those moments when there's no one else that can have a word for me, that what the Lord has placed in me by his Spirit in my heart begins to remind me, but this is what the Lord's done. That I always let the Lord guide me, that he is at my right hand. That's actually strange language. In the scriptures, oftentimes the idea of right hand is that to be at somebody's right hand means that you are their right hand man. You are their top chief assistant. Yeah, you're the person that serves them the most. And so it feels like it's a little bit diminutive to the Lord to be like, hey, you're my right hand dude. You're my level one assistant. But I don't think what he's saying is that the Lord in some way serves him. I think what he's saying is that I have this confidence of the Lord's nearness to me, that when I need help, that the Lord is my help. Yes. So the Lord is at my right hand. Like, think about the proximity language. That I'm not searching up on a mountaintop. I'm not going down into some deep, dark valley. I don't have to make this mountainous trek to some long, faraway land. That right at my right hand, my help is here. Amen. The Lord is my help. He says, therefore, my heart is glad, my whole being rejoices, my body also rests securely. Now, the way we think, even the way I've talked this morning, I've talked about the language of the head and the language of the heart. And so we talk about them as if they're separate things. In fact, that often gets us in trouble because we're like, this is why we have things like crimes of passion versus premeditated crimes. Now, both of them are going to get you in a whole lot of trouble. But crimes of passion, at least there's this, your heart was doing some things that your mind wasn't involved in. And it's true. There are moments when you're on autopilot. When you're driving down the 405, hear that as stuck in the same spot for 65 minutes on the 405. and somebody cuts you off so you can't get to an exit, you might say some things that may be crimes of passion, not premeditated. But the way that the scriptures think about the way that we're constructed, that those things overlap and impact each other. And so this language about the heart and the whole being and the body having this experience of rejoicing and being glad and feeling secure. He's not saying that part of me feels secure, part of me is rejoicing, part of me is having this experience of gladness. He's trying to use all this language to say that every fiber of who I am is glad, rejoicing, and rests securely in you. That this is the benefit of me trusting you. For you will not abandon me to Sheol. You will not allow your faithful one to see decay. And those verses actually may look familiar to you because they're repeated in the New Testament. In fact, in the book of Acts chapter 2 and I believe chapter 13, they're repeated. And Peter and then Paul would say that this is what God has done through Jesus. That he didn't leave his anointed one to be abandoned to death, but instead he raised him up that he would not decay, that he's faithful in that way. But David doesn't know that. David isn't seeing into the future. He's got a belief that God's going to be faithful, but it feels like this is this real present in the situation that I'm in. You're not backing out of it saying, hey, good luck. I hope you figure that out. If you die, you die. Good luck. He's saying, but you've been faithful. That's why I'm asking you to be my refuge, that you're not going to abandon me because of the way that you've exhibited your faithfulness. And then verse 11, you reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. Now, if you are somebody that wants to pay attention to detail, you might be like, wait a minute, if he's at my right hand, how am I at his right hand? Don't worry about it. It's poetic language. But I want you to hear what he's saying. You're not going to abandon me, but instead, you're not going to abandon me to death, but instead you're making known to me the path to life. Yeah. Like there are two paths in front of us, and one is going to lead to what's good, and the other one is going to lead to destruction and decay. And you're not going to leave me by myself to figure it out at the fork in the road because I will mess this up. Right. But instead, that you're going to make known to me the path of life. I actually think Jesus says it a little bit stronger. Because his disciples are having a conversation with him and he's trying to assure them, hey, what I said to you, I'm going to do, that I'm going to go to the Father. I'm going to prepare a place for you. That in fact, if that weren't the case, I wouldn't have told you that in my Father's house, that there are many rooms for you. Yeah. And I'm thankful for Thomas because Thomas raises his hand and says, I don't know what you're talking about, Jesus. And Jesus says in John 14:6-7, Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you also know my Father. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Hear what Jesus is saying. Like, not that I'm just pointing you on a path, but I am that path. That I am the way to the Father. That, like, it's not just, hey, if you figure out the right way to go apart from me, separate from me, that you can get there. But like, there's no way to get to the Father except from me. And not just the path to life, but I am life. Amen. Like, you don't want one without the other. This was Moses' heartbreak when God said, look, y'all have already messed up too much. We're a month into this liberation thing, and I'm already sick of y'all. And he said, so you go into the promised land. You can have it. And Moses is like, if you don't go before us, we don't want to go. Like, if you're not on the path with us, I don't want it. And this may be the key difference between what biblical joy is and what worldly joy is. I think sometimes we get a little bit twisted up thinking that if I go after this thing called joy, that I'm not going after Jesus. But I'm just going to say it the way that I feel, that if there's something in Jesus that I can have, I want all of it. And so if part of it is this abundance of joy, this fullness of life, this ability to know eternal pleasures, if that's part of knowing him, I want to know that also. Yes. The desire for security, life, and joy is a definitive mark of the people who are of God's presence. So our main idea again. As followers of Christ, our joy is not defined by circumstances or culture. It's rooted in Jesus. I'm gonna give you 4 things that are going to be definitive marks for us as followers of Jesus, specifically at Kings Harbor. But I want to give you a visual picture to help you kind of understand this journey. Because what I haven't settled is if you're somebody who's like, I think joy is a really great idea, but I've been through so much trauma. I think joy is a really great idea, but I actually battle the inability physically for my body to produce the hormones the way that it should, that I don't feel, so that I wouldn't feel the level of depression that I do. And so you're telling me that it's a mark of the people of God. Are you trying to say that I'm not somebody who's of God because I don't feel that? And so I think the path language is really, really helpful. When I was in high school, I don't know why this happened, but I decided one season not just to run track, but to run cross country. Now, let me just define it. And if you're a high school student, you're in here, you run cross country, hear what I'm going to say. My heart is not to offend you in any way, shape, or form. It is ludicrous to run long distances just because you can. You run a long time because somebody's chasing you, not because you're like, I might get a medal in these short shorts. Like, it's just not smart. And I can say it because I did it. And so my favorite race was in a place called Stillwater, Oklahoma State University. And the reason for that is because that race was this unique race where it had like these really like sharp degree hills. And so when you were running that race, good parts of the race were on flat terrain. It's Oklahoma, so there were also like little cattle grates that you had to jump over in the middle of the race, which just wasn't safe. And then there would be these like sharp, like 45-degree incline, like 100-meter hills. And those hills tested multiple things. One of the things is it just tested your internal fortitude. Because when you've been running for 2.5 miles and you see a hill that feels like you got to like climb Mount Everest, you're like, man, I don't want that smoke. I'm going back and drinking some water and get some oranges. This is dumb. It tested your strategy. Because if you were a good runner and you were at a spot in the race where you could use those hills at an advantage, either because you could increase your lead, because you sprinted up the hill while your competition couldn't, or you used it to vault you down the hill to maybe gain some momentum and catch up. It actually tested your mental acumen. Can you use what you know is coming to help propel you forward? And then it just, as an athlete, tested your explosiveness. So like running on flat ground, like just jogging doesn't take like this deep-seated like power in your body. Like you can do it. You can stumble forward at a rhythmic pace and call it jogging. In fact, that's what I used to do when I played basketball to try to get through laps. But to power up a hill was about sprinting. And why I loved the race was because I was a sprinter and I'm like, I don't think there's any of y'all that can beat me at 100 meters going uphill. And so it tested these different things, but the reality was that the path that you were on was going to test something in you. Don't be deceived and think that because that you're on this path towards life, that there's not going to be these steep hills that test something in you. That hill might test your mentality before the Lord. Like, do you trust him as much as you say that you trust him? It might test your heart in such a way that can you really rest fully in him, like the text would say that we are supposed to rest fully in him. It may test your body and test your health. But as you run this path, the fact that you're facing challenges doesn't mean that you're not on the path. It actually might mean that the thing that's coming up may test what's down in you, and you might find something in you that you did not know was there. And so here's what I hope that you find is there. Here are 4 things. We experience joy in celebrating the freedom bought by Christ's death and resurrection. Like, I want you to key in on those words specifically. We celebrate the freedom. If you have confessed that Jesus is your Lord, you are free. I don't care how much you feel like sin is wrapping itself around your ankles and your wrist and even around your neck. Jesus has made you free. You are not who you used to be.
Right. Yes.
And you have the opportunity to celebrate that. Shauna wasn't up here belting out, thank you, Jesus, for the blood applied because we liked what key it's in. We're singing it because we want your mind and your heart and your grit on the inside to know that regardless of how much sin feels like it's mastering me, that the blood of Jesus has broken the bondage, has opened the door and set you free from sin. We celebrate the freedom that Jesus purchased. That's the reason why we set aside a whole weekend every quarter to just say, hey, we're going to slow down and we're going to celebrate. This is when I get to move into my Oklahoma. I don't think it's Southern, but we think it's Southern. So lower on the map in America, that feeling of act the plumb fool. But can I tell you a secret? I actually want you to live that way every week. We get to celebrate and we experience joy in that. Now, before you shut me down and be like, you've been talking about joy, experiencing joy, we also experience joy in enduring hardship and suffering with gratitude and resilience. I've had conversations with people over the last few years who've gone through just really hard things. And many of them have said to me, I don't think I realized how deeply I needed Jesus and how available Jesus was to me until I walked through this. I've said this to you before, like I say it joking all the time. I only got 3 sermons about the kingdom, about suffering, and about the gospel. That's all I got. But I've said this in suffering sermons before, that suffering doesn't obscure the beauty of Jesus, it clarifies it. And when we endure with resilience and gratitude, there's a joy in that you may not know if you didn't run up that hill. We experience joy in valuing kingdom citizenship over the comforts and pleasures of this world. If you belong to Jesus, you belong to the kingdom of God. Not to the city of Torrance, not to the city of Lomita, not to the city of Palos Verdes, not to the state of California, not to the United States, not to North America. You belong to the kingdom. Now, that doesn't mean we despise our membership. Like, you're like, I'm not paying taxes no more. I'm not giving you permission to do that. It's not what I said. But your joy is not linked to how things are going in the neighborhood around you. Let me just go ahead and say it now so you don't get mad at me next year. Your joy is not linked to who wins the presidential election in 2024. And so those of you who amen me, don't get mad at me when I say, hey, my guy's not up for election. I'm not talking about who's going to be elected next year. Don't get mad at me. We are kingdom citizens. Our joy is found in the revealing of the kingdom everywhere that we go. It's not found in, man, gas rates are really high in Southern California right now. Last one. We find joy. We experience joy in the flourishing of others. There's a popular statement that says that comparison is the thief of joy. And you know that. When you pull up in your driveway in your 2010 Toyota Camry that's barely hanging on. When I pull up in my driveway with my and you look over at your neighbor and they've got a Tesla, you don't have, I mean, you probably don't have joy in your 2010 Camry anyways. But if you did, it's going to be much less if you look over at your neighbor and you're like, oh man. But what if we could take that and say, man, look at the goodness of the Lord. That person is flourishing. I think oftentimes this gets us in trouble. Maybe you've been in that work situation where somebody gets a promotion that you don't think needs to get a promotion. Like, I work harder. I show up early. They're always late to meetings. They always take extra 15 minutes at lunch. They don't even like this job. They got a promotion. What if you took joy in their flourishing? I'll just confess this to you out loud. When I was single and I'd have people getting around me that were married and be like, how was he getting married before me? Y'all are like, ha, 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 ha. Don't call me out, Pastor. As opposed to taking joy that, and this person put their hope in the Lord and allowed the Lord to lead them to the person that they're going to spend their life with. If the Lord could do that for them, man, I'm just trusting the Lord that he's going to be able to do that for me, that instead I would compare and lose joy instead of take joy in the flourishing of others. But here's where I want to end our time. I just want to give you permission to pursue. If what I'm reading with you in Psalm 16 is that being people who are intimately linked to the work of Jesus makes security and life and joy available, I just want to give you permission to pursue it. Maybe you say, I've prayed for it before and it didn't happen. Maybe you're like a Naaman. Story of Naaman, 2 Kings, that he has got leprosy and Elisha won't even come out of the house to come see him. He's just like, hey, you go wash in the Jordan River. It's bad enough that he's going to go wash in a dirty river, but then he gets in the first time, comes out, and he's still got leprosy. Like, he was a commander in an army, and if I'm Naaman in the story, somebody's getting the sword. But he had the courage to get back in the water and come out again 6 more times. And maybe you've prayed for it and the Lord hasn't given you joy. But wouldn't it be worth it if you came out different, if you prayed again? When I was a kid, my dad used to always talk about Matthew chapter 7. Jesus is preaching through the Sermon on the Mount. Near the end, he begins to say this kind of idea of thinking where he would say, ask, seek, knock. My dad would actually use that as an acronym, ASK, to ask, seek, knock. And so here's what Jesus would say in those verses. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Who among you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? I just want you to see 2 things, and I just want to give you permission to ask. Jesus is literally telling those that are listening to him, if there's a gift of grace that comes from knowing me, ask me for it. Like, Jesus is not being stingy, like, you're asking for joy, you're asking for a little bit too much. Like, you have permission to pursue it. And the qualification for receiving it has nothing to do with merit. He puts it in this family relationship. He's talking to a group of people, many of which were probably parents, and he says to them, which one of you that if your child came to you and asked you for bread, you would say, no, you're not getting bread today, you're getting a stone? Which one of you that instead of giving your child a fish would say, you know what, we're going to have rattlesnake on the menu tonight? Some of y'all country, maybe you would do that, but like there's this clear idea that because of the level of relationship, you're glad to meet the request. I just want you to know that if you have trusted Jesus, that you get what the Son gets. That you've been adopted into the family. This is what Romans 8 would say, that you can now cry out because of the Spirit, that you can cry out, Abba, Father, that you are a joint heir with Jesus. Like you get to get what the Son gets. And so if you're asking the Father for something in the name of the Son, if you're asking him for joy, which he says that he wants to give you, that he gives you joy. And we don't have to feel bad about asking for that. I just want to encourage you to have the permission to pursue the thing that the Lord says, I want to give you this. Like, I don't want this to become this weird thing about, well, if we're pursuing joy, are we pursuing Jesus? Is joy within Jesus? If it's in the boundary lines that have been laid for me, then I'm going after it. I don't want to make it, well, this is emotional. He's the Lord of my emotions too. And I certainly don't want to make it, well, it's been hard for me to grasp this, so it just must be off limits for me. He said, ask. He said, seek. He said, knock. Don't give up just because the hill feels like it's too tall. Keep sprinting. It's exposing something in you. And if he's our only good, I just believe what he's exposing is going to be good. pray together. Jesus, I thank you. I feel this immense burden. Would you give us courage to ask? I know people who have sat in my office, who've submitted prayer requests to our care team, who have been racked with anxiety and depression, who feel like this abundant joy is not available to them. Lord, today, would you meet them where they are? And by giving them the courage to ask, would you give them a good gift of joy? That doesn't mean that they'll never face another hill. That doesn't mean that they'll never experience another challenge. But what it does mean is that you, because of the intimacy and the nearness of who you are, can provide joy for them even in the midst of enduring the hardship. Lord, would you visit us uniquely? Would this be a corrective to our culture? Would it be a corrective to the culture at large that's looking to find joy in other things? But would also be a corrective to our Kings Harbor culture. We've been through a lot of trauma, Jesus. But would we not be defined by being a people who've been marked by trauma, but would be a people who've been marked by the closeness of your presence, bringing us through, and therefore we know joy? Would you give us permission, not just on celebration Sundays, but Sunday after Sunday, and Monday after Monday, and Tuesday after Tuesday, and every day thereafter, to live out this experience of joy? Not good theoretical notes about joy, not language of the mind, but language of the heart and the mind that says, you've promised this, and now I get to enter into this. At your right hand is the fullness of joy and pleasures evermore. Would you allow us to experience them? We began this morning in this moment of worship, of drawing near and experiencing something. I just believe that you are starting something, that as we come back here in a few moments to worship again, would you invite us back to that same place to experience that, yes, I'm doling out my presence. I'm making myself known. I'm drawing near, and I've got joy for you. I've got health for you. I've got peace for you. I've got faith for you. Would you make that available to us, and would you give us the courage to seek it? You promise that you are a father much better than any earthly father and mother who have found ways to conjure up money to give good gifts. How much more you, who has no shortness of supply, will you provide for the things that we're seeking and asking? Would you just give us the courage this morning? It's in your matchless name I pray. Amen.
Thanks so much for checking out this message from Kings Harbor. We would love to connect with you. If you go to kingsharbor.org/hello and fill out a short connect card, that allows us the opportunity to follow up with you. Also, if this message has been a blessing to your life, we believe that the Lord wants to rule and reign in every part of who we are. That means our time, our talent, our treasure. And so if this has been a blessing, we would ask that you would consider contributing back to the ministries of Kings Harbor so we can continue to bless and help people in the same way that we hope we have done for you. With that in mind, we want you to know that our heart towards you and our heart towards the world around us is that we want to be a love-forward people. And we're praying that you would join us in that.